Paul, so it's a couple of days on from Tuesday now. Last time we spoke last week, we were on about those defensive mistakes, trying to eradicate those from the game, and then all of a sudden Tuesday it comes about again.
Yeah.
That's sort of been the same message repeated this week again.
Yeah, I think we have to. There's no point hiding away from it. At the same time, you almost shouldn't need to say it because it's blatantly obvious for everyone to see. And I guess that's a frustration because we were definitely up against a good team. We'd kept them out, maybe a little bit of luck, but some good defending, good blocks, and had a couple of chances ourselves. So to then go behind to such a poor goal and then make it even worse, while ever it's 1-0, you're never quite sure, especially when it would have gone straight to penalties. So then to concede another really poor goal, I think if they'd have scored 2 worldies, we still would have been disappointed in losing the game, but it just gives it a different feel somehow. So a frustration that, again, we are talking about that because quite a lot of the goals we have conceded, we would say have been avoidable. So it's something we've definitely got to tighten up on. We're aware of that, whether it actually happens, because again, sat here saying those words is extremely easy, and ultimately when you're out on the pitch, we talked about we've got to start making better decisions, and a lot of that is linked to that side of the game, but also in terms of an attacking sense as well at times, and like I said, raising the quality of everything, because that's the challenge of the league. I do believe that the squad's been improved. I think we had a conversation with the manager about that. Their view from the outside is certainly that, but I think what we both were very on the same page was how much the league's improved. And again, I know we were talking about a cup game the other day, but against opposition from our division, so those levels have to go up.
I suppose that can knock confidence as well for those players. What have they been like in training this week?
I think the next day we were in, and as you'd expect, there's a little bit of probably fatigue from the game because we do it that way around, so they then hopefully getting a better night's sleep, more recovery. The reason we're doing it at this moment in time is if we think from a physical point of view, that the benefits of being in the following day rather than having the day off and then coming in are there, so we're trying to give the players the best chance on that side. But yeah, the next day probably a little bit tired, and as you can imagine, not happy because of the defeat, but also, as we just touched on, the reasons behind it. So it takes a little bit of time to check that off. Probably the same goes for myself. As much as the message is very much, it has gone, you can't change it, you can change things moving forward. I think you do have to go through a little process of getting over that, starting to feel better about life again, and getting ready for the next game.
We saw Josh Feeney doing some warm-ups before the game with Chris Skate, doing some runs up and down the pitch. How close is he potentially to getting a start?
Today he's done some more work, and that's been upped again. I'm really happy with where he's at. I think we have an agreement with Aston Villa in terms, I think they want to see him themselves once we get to a certain point, and I think we're either there or very close to it, if not. So at some point that will have to happen. But for ourselves, like I said, I think he is very close to a return to training. Again, we have to remember he was involved in their tour but didn't play lots of minutes, and hasn't played to date so far this season. So again, we have to manage that kind of expectation and have to understand it ourselves. But hopefully, I would have thought, in 2 weeks tops, I would suggest, I'd expect him to be available. So that's what we're certainly hoping for.
And I suppose he's eager to get going as well.
He is. Look, I think there's a lot of frustration in terms of him getting injured in that first training session for everyone, but particularly for Josh, because he said he's not really had injuries before, so that's something new, and he didn't really know how to describe his injury, and probably wasn't quite sure how to manage it, how to deal with it. So he very much wants to get out there and show people what he can do, because he's, you know, whatever level and whatever team he's been used to playing games. So naturally, when you're not, that's you know, not easy to deal with.
Leyton Orient coming up this weekend. Good win for them over Millwall in midweek, but yet to pick up a point in League One. What are your early thoughts going into that?
They haven't, but I know I bumped into Richie while we were away on holiday, and we had a chat, and I think we had exchanged some messages since that in terms of the start that they knew they got. So I think you have to take that into consideration, and the 3 games they've lost against extremely good teams, but have been very much in those games. A late goal at Charlton, Birmingham at the weekend, I thought they played really well. You know, we obviously watched the games back, and Bolton the first game was a single goal difference in the scoreline, and probably a couple of mistakes for the goals they have conceded that they'll be hoping to eradicate. So yes, the fact, if you look at league table, we've got 0 points, but I don't think that tells anywhere near the full story. You know, I'm sure they'll be looking at this game wanting to get the first points on the board, and likewise for ourselves. It wouldn't really matter who we're playing. We want to start putting points on the board. So they've got some good players. They play very comfortable in possession. Have been very aggressive out of possession on what we've seen. That's probably, to me at least, we played them the last game of last season. I think that's a little bit of a different approach, or it certainly looks as though they're doing it with more intent. So no, look, as always, there's no easy games for us. Let's not, you know, beat around the bush on that. And we're expecting the best version of Orient to turn up, so we want to bring that from ourselves as well.
Do you think it's sort of unfair to call this one a so-called must-win or a 6-pointer then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do, like, genuinely, because I spoke with someone the other day and kind of said if we win the game, suddenly that doesn't mean everything's right and we've cracked it. And likewise, if we are on the wrong side of the result, are we all just going to say, oh, that's it, we'll stop? We've got 42 more games in the league. But the longer it goes, obviously you want to, as I said, you want that first win, or you certainly want to, you know, get at least a point on the board. So from that point of view, I see it. But in general, there's a hell of a long way. I was involved in a team, and I always relate to this with tough starts or a bigger picture. We didn't win for 10 games in a season. We didn't win in the last 10 games of a season, and we stayed up. So we must have done something right in the middle part, accepted. But that just shows it's not simply about how you start or how you finish even. It is over 46 games. But you want to try and make sure you're not making life harder for yourself. And when you talk about confidence, of course, that is helped massively by, you know, winning games of football.
Jordan Ross, you mentioned a couple of weeks ago, had a problem with his knee. Where he's sort of up to with that prognosis? Yeah,
he's had an injection, excuse me, and he says, oh, it's like being a bit of a magic remedy, but that doesn't mean he's ready to play. The process is a couple of weeks after that injection. So I think, speaking to him earlier, between him and Skitty, they'd mentioned the Mansfield game. Again, we haven't gone into detail yet about if that's a full training week ahead of that game or whether it's just that game's achievable. But it gives you an insight into it shouldn't be sort of too far away. So hopefully we can get him back on that training pitch, and then again the process starts. At least he has played pre-season games and had played two games for us, so fingers crossed it won't be too long from when he is back out there training.
He's someone who's been really unlucky in his career, hasn't he, with injuries? Was it something that had carried over, or was it something new?
No, well, we don't believe so, certainly, albeit the cyst, I think, that was there, that's been injected, you know, they're not quite sure how that comes, and it could have been something, but overall, for him to get an infection in his knees, clearly not anything that's his fault, and was a very unfortunate thing that happened to him from a knee injury that, yeah, maybe not brilliant, but should have been nowhere near the length of time out that he suffered because of that infection.
Cody missing out last weekend as well. What's the situation with him?
Yeah, he'll be missing out again, which was probably the more likely event. We're hoping we can get him back out next week, so he could potentially then, you know, be involved, or certainly in contention for the Wrexham game.
Morgan Feeney coming back though. Some more positive news. A couple good goal line clearances against Bolton as well. How's he sort of getting along with that?
Seems fine, and again it's like a little bit of an odd one because from him picking up that injury and even being assessed, there was a thought that we could have lost him for, you know, a number of months. So then almost, I think it was less than a week later, I think he trained on the Friday afterwards, I think it was, something like that, and then he's on the bench and then he plays on the Tuesday. It's, yeah, I'd like to, you know, we like Skitty, but I don't think he's got miracle hands or anything like that. But it is almost a, you know, a strange circumstance that's happened, but I'm kind of okay with that because it's a positive for us that Morgan's fit and available, and you know that remains the case. As far as I'm aware, he hasn't said anything and trained today fine, was in Wednesday fine after the game, that he'll be available.
It's deadline day, it's the last day. I can ask you about transfers, so I'm sure you'll be delighted to hear that.
Yeah.
Expecting much activity today?
Yeah, I think we've got one deal done and agreed, so the rest of the day, never say never, but as I've said, I think we kind of are where we're at. Probably just enjoy watching a lot of other stress around players, and might finally hear the last of a name like Ivan Toney, or no disrespect to him, but you know, him and Oshiman and Sterling, Sancho, we can perhaps put them names to bed, because I think probably like a lot of people, you get sick to death of hearing them.
Yeah, obviously it's been well documented about, you know, you've been on a limited budget this season, and then there's talk on social media and in the press today about another club in this league potentially looking at someone from the Premier League for like £9–10 million. I mean, 5 years ago that was completely unheard of. Does that sort of just blow your mind that money's been thrown about?
Yeah, look, I think it does feel like you're almost in a different league, but as I said, we're in the same league. I think they've broke the record a couple of times, the said club, and they're trying to obviously break it again. But there's a lot of teams that are trying to spend some serious money. You know, I look at Wrexham just signed a striker. I think we're trying to get another one for you know, a lot of money. I guess we can all look on with envious eyes, but ultimately, you know, we are where we're at and we're working with what we've got, and you've got to just do your best with that. Like I said, I came back to the football club with my eyes wide open. There's certainly no criticism or nothing's changed from that point of view. As I've said many times, got a really good relationship with the chairman. We get on great. I think we both understand the challenge ahead, but we'll try his best on both sides to get the best squad that we can, and then hopefully, as we've said it all along, to try and prove a few people wrong. Money isn't the answer overall. We know it helps, and I think, again, if we being fair in terms of looking and assessing the league as a whole and what people are spending, yeah, we know it's going to be tough, but we also, you take to the field of play, it's 0-0, and it starts out 11v11, and you've got to try and cause them mini upsets, if you like, big upsets on occasions, to, you know, show that on your day you can beat teams and you can compete. And I think in the games results we haven't quite managed to get. We've been in all the games, and yes, there's been moments against, or spells against some of the teams, like the other night, where maybe we are up against it a little bit or being pushed back, they're having a bit more possession, things like that. but overall, scoreline wise, we've been in it, and I include Peterborough up to the 87th minute. So we've got to take something from that, and if we can tighten up in terms of those mistakes we discussed and trying to be a little bit more ruthless at the other end, and plus we should get better because we've got players in that ultimately don't quite know each other yet, or maybe aren't at absolute full capacity just yet, which is understandable, so they're pre-seasons and backgrounds, then that has to be a good sign, and that's what we've got to keep doing. All we can do is try to be the best version of ourselves. After that, we can't control other people's squads and what they're spending, but we can certainly try and compete against them when we come up against them.
Well, you mentioned those performances. It was a very encouraging performance against Huddersfield, and probably unlucky not to take at least a point away from that game. Is that something you've shown to the players that we can go and look, this is what you're capable of?
We spoke about it. We haven't you know, shown that. I think sometimes we can end up having too many meetings and, you know, showing too many clips, and for me there's a little bit of that's where I have to try and make that call of when it's right to really, you know, sit him down and go through a lot of it. At the minute, because we've been Saturday, Tuesday, a lot of meetings, and a lot of it is based on the next opponent rather than kind of dissecting previous performance, because as I've said, we're on to the next one. And I think sometimes you can fill players' heads with too much information, but there's no doubt that it's not the classroom, but people talk about that. More time is spent because of how much analysis now is, I think, seen as the norm. The players have to use that as part of a learning tool, whether that's trying to hurt opposition, whether it's showing their strengths, whether it's highlighting good or bad from your own performances. So it's something that I think players now are brought up with, and I would say the majority of them are probably at an age where they've started to get used to that.
And just finally from me, you mentioned about players still getting to know each other, still getting to gel. How can you sort of support that in training, or is it something they sort of just have to pick up on the pitch?
Some of that happens just off the pitch, in terms of the dressing room, you know, having food together, travelling away, maybe rooming with someone away if it's an overnight stay. And of course, there's the other side of it in terms of relationships, understanding each other's game, which will probably happen in terms of, it might be someone who's on the bench for a game or warming up, seeing, you know, looking at their position and maybe the person behind them or in front of them, and getting an understanding of what's their natural game or what's being asked of them. So a combination of all those things, you know, is probably the truth around it all. And sometimes just certain players click with others in terms of combination. I think Mal and Jordan Shipley, for example, from when I came in, that seemed quite a natural combination that worked really well for us.
Cool, best of luck this weekend.
Thanks very much.